So those who produce these fake or replica watches, they employ a really clever trick to get people to keep on buying the latest forgeries. You know, step by step, they improve something they got wrong the last time, which makes the latest super clone or replica extremely hard to tell apart from the original. And here's the catch. These forgers built in one or two more or less obvious mistakes or tells, so they would have something to improve again and keep on going and going. But this Daytona is different. This is probably the most accurate replica I have ever seen, and it's also the first one on which I couldn't immediately spot something right away. It really took a good amount of time and an ultra macro lens to be able to spot distinct differences between the replica and the original. And on a not so fun side fact, we brought it to a watchmaker and they weren't able to tell them apart either without taking the case back off. So in this video, I want to show you the 7 tells that can still help you to distinguish the original from this almost $1,000 high-end replica, and also prevent you from making a, at this time, almost $30,000 mistake. And when we are through with the 7 tells, I'd also want to show you which part on the replica is even better compared to the authentic one. So let's get started. But before we head into the showdown, I want to thank today's sponsor, Chronext, from who I was able to borrow the authentic Daytona from this video. If you are not buying from an AD and want to make sure that your watch is authentic, you can check out Chronext and their big variety of watches in their online shop. They offer certified luxury watches, so you're safe here, including this Daytona with no waiting lists and with pickup locations all over the world, free delivery and a 14-day return policy. And I have a very special coupon code for my viewers. With code Jenny, you'll get a discount on your next order from Chronext, so make sure to use code Jenny at checkout. The first 2 tells are the easiest to spot without a magnifying glass or something similar, but I got bad news for you though. Those aren't always reliable, but I will get to that in a second. So tell number 1 is on the clasps, or let's start it that way. The overall finishing is surprisingly good on the fake. The bracelet itself is now also made from 904L steel, the same alloy Rolex is using. And so by just looking at it, you can say that the bracelet of the replica is just as well finished as the authentic one. But you know, the devil always lies in the detail, and this time it's at the clasp itself. On an authentic Rolex, you get these even gaps or spaces in between the separate parts. The replica here is much more sharp edged, which gets even more obvious when you see that there are almost no gaps in between the latch and the rest of the clasp. It's something that most replicas can't or won't properly do. Those way too sharp edges, no real smoothness, and so it is something I look at first. So yeah, if you have no smooth edges and little to no even gaps between these individual parts and everything looks just like crammed in together, chances are it's a replica you're looking at. So for tell number 2, we are going to spend a little more time on the clasp and zoom in a bit. The next point that gives away the fake watch is the crown on the clasp. With an authentic Daytona, you can zoom in as closely as you want. The crown stays nice and smooth and rounded in its form, right? So let's put the fake clasp next to it and zoom in on that crown. Can you see the overall much worse finishing? On the rounded ends of the tips of the crown, you can definitely see the rough structure. And can you also spot this like weird border around it? This is very likely a welding seam, another thing you will not be able to find on an authentic watch. But before you come for me in the comments saying that that's super obvious and that you'd be silly not to see it, let me again tell you that I am using an ultra macro lens for this. Even with the naked eye or those watchmaker lenses that you get, you will not be able to spot these structural differences here. But that isn't even the biggest issue. You could simply go out and buy an authentic Daytona bracelet for about, let's say, $2,000 and put it onto the replica watch body, which is really the end game when it comes to replicas. So that means we will have to look even closer with the next tells. So for tell number 3, we'll definitely need that ultra macro lens again to be able to spot it, because we are going to look at the luminous material on the hour markers. So on the authentic Daytona, Rolex uses luminous material that is called superluminova. It's a strong glowing substance that keeps glowing for quite some time when it gets dark. And if you look very closely, you will recognize superluminova by its very fine but still visible sand-like or granular structure. Do you see that on the hour marker? Well, that is superluminova. luminova. But the forgers make use of a different material. When zooming in really close, I think you can instantly see what I mean. Do you see it? The hour marker on the replica has a super smooth, a way too smooth surface. And here's the good news. It's something you would definitely be able to spot if your eyes are okay and if you have something you could compare it to. The authentic hour markers appear off-white, and when I put the replica next to it, you can see that their hour markers are almost a perfect white with this slightly almost like greenish tint to them, right? So yeah, a little magnifying glass would definitely show you the differences here. Okay, let's continue with tell number 4, for which we're going to stay a little longer with the hour markers because there is another detail that these forgers did not replicate accurately. On an authentic Rolex, the hour markers as well as the crown at 12 and the hands are made from white gold. Compared to steel, for example, white gold is much softer to work with and therefore easier to bend into certain shapes. And Rolex makes use of that. The edges on the crown and the hour markers are super smooth and rounded. Look very closely and you can see the nice round drop off at the edges here. Unsurprisingly, the replica makers do not use white gold here and also put much less love and heart into it. Though I have to give it to them that the finishing is still incredibly considering the price, but look right here. You can definitely see that they did not really care about perfectly shaping those edges. They drop off pretty harshly compared to the authentic watch. The same goes for the hands, though Rolex has been known to get involved in some GMT hand scandals. They are known for their excellent dial finishing considering the high volume they produce. So though you can't spot it with the naked eye, you can tell under a macro lens that the replica hands show a lot of frazzling and other bits. Even the coloring on the minute hand isn't properly centered, and frazzling or off-center coloring like that is definitely something you will not find on an authentic watch. Right, now it gets really mean because we have to dive really deep and check out the lettering for tell number 5. Way back in the day, the lettering on replicas was very obviously frazzled and overall just bad and something you could spot right away. But those days are long gone, and this is also what I'm going to show you now. Can you say with absolute certainty if the watch you are seeing right now is an authentic one or not? You can pause the video right now and leave a comment down below with the timestamp and let me know what you think. In general, you would be able to identify the replica by a slightly more bold lettering and markings on the dial. Those tiny lines or sticks on the side are overall applied really well. So it's only when we put the authentic Daytona right next to it is when we can see the differences in thickness. And to answer your question, what I just showed a couple of seconds ago was the authentic Daytona. And as you can see, the details on fake look much thicker in comparison. And we're going to stay on the dial because we need to take a look at the raised inside of the dial, please don't kill me for mispronouncing it, Rehaut? I don't know, sorry. On an authentic watch, you get the repeated Rolex lettering with the watch's serial number at 6 o'clock engraved into that frame. Something that makes a watch harder to replicate, but definitely not impossible, as you can see. But I wouldn't have brought it up if there wasn't a slight difference on the replica. So on the authentic watch, the engraving is super sharp, clean and even, no irregularities here. On the replica, however, we can clearly see a thick dark line right in the middle of the lettering. The only problem here is the fact that you would still need an ultra macro lens to see that. A regular magnifying glass definitely would not be enough here. So if you are still watching up to this point, thank you. I am sure you realized how difficult it is to tell these two apart, but it gets even tougher when you are, in the middle of buying the watch instead of just sitting in the studio like I did for hours. And I'm sure you're not just going to, whip out a microscope when you're about to buy a watch, right? So my last tell is something that could save us all from carrying around a microscope or a camera with an ultra macro lens all the time. There is only one catch here. You have to open up the case back because that's the only way to take a look at the movement. And I have to say, I was really shocked at first when I saw the replica movement. At first glance, pretty much all parts are where they should be, except for one little detail. And let's see if you can spot it. There is one part here on the fake that is too much. So something you wouldn't find on the authentic movement. And you could spot it right away if you knew what to look for. So can you see it? Rolex is using regulator screws. Those are these tiny little bits on the balance, so you can loosen or tighten them to change, well, the balance point of the balance, to either slow it down or make it faster to set it accurately up to the second. But that is something only Rolex uses. That's why you can see this small second little thingy on the replica movement, because that is the regulation mechanism of the fake movement. And well, that is something which lets you spot all replica watches right away with absolute certainty. Okay, so now that we went over the 7 tells, I want to get back to my promise I made in the beginning, something the replica is better at compared to the authentic Rolex. So since the middle of the 2000s, Rolex engraved this tiny little crown on the bottom of their crystals. You have to find the right angle to spot it, which might take a while, but it's there. And so while you can see the crown on the authentic here, I have to say that the engraved crown on the replica looks a lot better. I am not sure why exactly that is. Perhaps they are using 2 different methods to apply that crown into the crystal, but the difference here is clearly visible. I think it is a bit ironic that the crystal crown used to be this, big distinguishing characteristic between fakes and authentic watches, and now the forgers went completely overboard and engraved a pretty perfect crown into their fakes. So yeah, now you know all of the 7 tells to distinguish even one of the best replicas from the authentic Daytona. And so if you have found this video helpful, you can give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more videos like that, you can subscribe to my channel. Again, a big thank you to the sponsor of this video, Chronext. And I will see you in my next one. Bye.